we've made a lot of progress against poverty. We've tried things, and some things didn't work and some things did work. So we know a lot about how to go in the right direction. The main constraint is lack of political will, or what you might call lack of organized give a damn. And that's what this book is about.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice Blom, and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen.
Good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen, and it is really a special one. This is actually the third time that David is on my podcast. So you're the number one, I think, David, on this list. The first time that we spoke was about your life and your work, especially everything you had done for Bread for the World at the time and the Alliance to End Hunger. And I don't remember if we realized that what we have in common. Well, we have a couple of things in common, but both of us have worked in Bangladesh. So that's kind of cool when I was reading about it in your book, because that is the emphasis of this third conversation that we are having. The second was about Church World Service, the organization that I worked for 26 years. But now we have more the angle of the organization that I work for now, and that's the Joint Learning Initiative on Faith in Local Communities. Anyway, David, first of all, congratulations with your book, Poverty, Abolitionists, Faith, Activism, and Hope for Difficult Times. I just said this before we started recording. People should read this. It's really insightful, important, more important than ever, I think, and also important for people that are living outside of the US, because I think you get a lot of understanding how this system works and how people connect and relate with each other. So thank you so much for that book, David. My first question to you is, why now? Why now this book?
Well, as you know, the world really has made remarkable progress against poverty over the last decades. But now, for the first time in decades, poverty is increasing around the world and also in the United States. And it's mainly because of the policies of the second Trump administration. So it seems urgent to address that. And the main thing that the book does is present 10 effective ways that people can push back against MAGA and get progress against poverty going again. I think it's really it's unfortunately very timely, and I hope it does some good. We need it.
And you call the book Poverty Abolitionists. So I hear a lot of people saying, can poverty really be abolished?
That's for sure. I mean, abolish, like there may be special situations where people are drug addicts or have special violence, tyranny, but the kind of mass poverty that we have around the world, and even in the USA, that is not necessary anymore. And we know that because we've made a lot of progress against poverty. We've tried things, and some things didn't work and some things did work. So we know a lot about how to go in the right direction. The main constraint is lack of political will, or what you might call lack of organized give a damn. And that's what this book is about.
And let us try to unpack poverty then a bit, because you mentioned about the 10 strategies, but before we go there, dive further into that. You organized the book around 5 insights, right? And which insight do you most wish people understood today?
I think the most important thing people need to know about poverty is that we can fix it. We know from experience that this is a problem that's usually solvable. It's not even very expensive. And it's that God's made it possible for people in our time to virtually eliminate poverty, hunger, avoidable disease. And that's changed the moral character of poverty. It's no longer enough to help out one family and feel good. I mean, we need to help out that family, but that's not enough. It's basically a policy challenge to actually abolish poverty, or virtually abolish poverty.
You know, yeah, David, you are aware, because it's the third time we're on this podcast. What I try to do is also connect my guests with each other. We are connected. You're connected with the listener. So connection is, from my point of view, really important as the first step into getting into dialogue and trying to solve problems. In order to do that, to connect you with the previous guest, I asked the previous guest if the guest would have a question for the next guest. So I would like to share that question with you. And she asks you,
what is the most effective thing that civil society should focus on? What should we really be investing on? Is that one issue that is more important than others and that will bring us change more than others?
I think the most important thing for us to do right now, at least in the United States, is to get more Democrats elected in November. If the minority party would become the majority party in one or both houses of Congress, that would put some restraint on President Trump. As it is, at least so far, he has so much power. He has so much support in Congress, in the Supreme Court. He's picked people for his administration who do whatever he wants. So there are no constraints. It's maybe the most powerful position in the world. But in the past, there was presidents didn't use all the power they had. This guy always thought he was the most powerful, most important person in the world, and we've made him the most powerful person in the world. So he's got to be stopped. It's not just about this particular person. I mean, there's an organization, there's a movement, the MAGA movement, but also he has a very unusual personality, and he's been able to impose that personality on the world. And so the way to reverse that is to win the elections. I've learned that in the United States, 2/3 of us vote. That's not bad. It could be better. And so mobilization of voters is important, but then also volunteering for political campaigns. According to one study, only 4% of Americans volunteer for political campaigns. And according to data from the Federal Election Commission, only 2% of Americans give more than $100 a year to candidates, PACs, or parties. So we leave it to a relatively small group of very wealthy people to decide to fund the process by which we decide who's going to govern the country. And I just think it's up to a lot of progressive people spend hours moaning about how terrible things are, but we need to give money. I think that's controversial because even progressive people, they say, oh, the Democrats aren't pushing hard enough. I don't want to give money to them. They're, they're not, they're deficient in this way or that way. But money is really important in politics. It just is. And especially since under the rules that govern US elections, money is really important in politics. So we can't compete with billionaires, but we can give candidates that we support enough money that they can run a campaign. So I think that's important. I also think one more thing, if I may, 501c3 organizations, like your organization, like CWS, churches are 501c3 organizations. They're governed by rules in the tax code. So people can make tax deductible contributions to 501c3 organizations, but in exchange, 501c3 organizations can't endorse candidates or parties. And I think there are lots of things they can do to influence elections, but there's this sort of fear that we've got to stay bipartisan. We can't talk about Republicans and Democrats, but the big decisions are made in the struggle between Republicans and Democrats. So I think churches and 501c3 organizations should do what they can do. One thing they can do is just teach people how to be effective in elections. They can talk about the values at stake in these elections. They can also help get out the vote. They can protect. There are certain poll sites where voters may be subjected to harassment. Black voters or Latino voters may be subjected to harassment. They may feel afraid to come. And so there are ways of protecting the polls and helping people vote. So in all those ways, nonprofits and churches need to do more. And certainly I think we as individuals should be giving, say, 1% of our income to change the politics of our country.
I have some questions for you around, politics and elections. But before we go there, I was listening to you, and I also think the listeners who have listened to your first two podcasts, they are thinking similar to me. Oh, David has kind of changed. The question I have for you, David, is: would your answer have been the same 10 years ago?
Well, no, I worked in a strictly bipartisan way. As president of Bread for the World. Bread for the World still does that. So you have to be really careful not to, to speak deferentially about people in both parties, and that's important too. That kind of bipartisan legislative advocacy with powerful people. This is the toughest political environment for that I've ever experienced. But still, in 2025, church groups and progressive groups had a couple wins. Surprisingly, the first time that Republicans in Congress pushed back against Trump was on the issue of international aid. Poverty around the world, especially PEPFAR, the U.S. Program to help deal with AIDS in Africa and other poor countries. The Republican appropriators pushed back, and then in February of this year, they approved $19 billion more for international aid than the president had requested. it's yet to be seen whether the administration actually does what Congress is telling them to do. You know, he, he, the president, you know, sort of does what he wants and tells somebody, you have to be pretty forceful to get him to change. But the law is the law, and they did approve $19 billion more. So, and in that process, bipartisan coalitions working with Congress over the years and right now have been really continue to be a viable way to protect poor people. But it's not enough. You know, demonstrations and other ways to fight back against or to protect against to protect democracy. This is a right-wing government with authoritarian tendencies. So that kind of direct action to protect democracy, and above all, taking advantage of the 26 and 28 elections is really important. David's the same guy. You know, I'm a Lutheran pastor.
Yeah.
I pay attention to data. My values are the same, but the situation is not the same, and also my role is not the same. I'm retired. I can say what I want. I'm working hard, but not making any money, so I can say pretty much what I want.
Understood, David. I still think, although you are, clearly, I totally understand that, passionate about that things need to change, because we were, making progress on issues around poverty, to focus on poverty, because there are a lot of other issues that also have gone backwards. But you still are able to tell stories in the book that there are still glimpses of hope. PEPFAR
Sure.
you mentioned, which is still supposed to happen. We have to see that then. And, WIC, which is the Women and Infant Child Program, right, in the US.
Right.
That still has some money. That,
yeah,
it's
and
an
they
interesting
increased
story.
the fund on that one. It's amazing.
Increased, yeah.
They increased funding for WIC. It's nutrition assistance for lactating women and very small children. And the Biden administration made some improvements in the program. They made it easier for women to connect to the WIC office digitally. They included fruits and vegetables and the package of foods that mothers can buy. And so as those changes are implemented, the programs become more expensive, but on a bipartisan basis. Actually, in one case with leadership from the White House, over 2 years, they added $1 billion to the annual appropriation for WIC. Now they cut $1.2 trillion from nutrition and health assistance. So, but it's not a small matter that the White House made that increased funding for WIC a top priority in one of the rounds of appropriations decisions.
Yeah, and what you described in the book is very much related to advocacy efforts, basically at the grassroots, that ultimately led to this, right?
Right. The book talks about that. The woman named
Mackenzie.
Yeah, Mackenzie. Is it Brown? Mackenzie Brown. She's a 29-year-old woman in Jasper, Alabama. And she grew up in poverty. She was raised by her grandma, but then she got through college, and now she's working at the Jasper Social Service Agencies. Jasper is in a congressional district that has a bigger percentage of Republicans than any other district in the country. And she has become Bread for the World's best ambassador to Representative Adderholt, who's a senior member of the Appropriations Committee. So I think it's partly because of her. Adderholt, he had voted against an increase in funding for WIC in 2024, but he voted for it in 2025 and 2026. He's, the latest, I talked to her briefly maybe a month ago, and now she's organizing letter writing activities for people who come to the Jasper Family Services Center. So she's helping them write letters to Adderholt on issues that are important to them.
Okay, no, and so that is really a great story, an important story, and it relates also to, I think your whole life, or a big part of your life, um, you've worked on this advocacy. Elections have always been important, democracy, and you explained, I think, why. But David, today many countries have good policies, but they are poorly implemented very often. So my question to you is, and to poke you a bit, is policy advocacy still as effective as it once was? Haven't we overestimated policy change and underestimated local agency?
Both are important.
Mhm.
You really, there's a chapter in the book on social justice, and it's on community organizations of disadvantaged groups like African Americans in this country, or Latinos, or Native Americans. And those organizations from the ground up, organizations that include low income people, the disadvantaged people, they're crucial. And partly because they can push from below to make programs work. I think that's crucial. But also working through the U.S. Congress, trying to elect good government officials, it has a huge impact. And sometimes policies don't work very well, but the combination of voices from the community and legislators who are trying to make it work, or even government officials who are trying to make it work, seems to me that's what we want. One thing we did before I worked at Bread for the World, I worked at the World Bank, and during that period, NGOs pushed, and I was in the bank, but we helped to make the World Bank more transparent. And it is still, you can go onto the World Bank website and read their economic reports to any government in the world. You can read what they are financing. So if you live in a region of a country in the developing world, you can read there, oh, they're supposed to build a bridge. Well, that was 5 years ago. Where's the bridge? That transparency is really important. And so that's a policy. If you get that policy from the top, I mean, you can push from the bottom to get transparency, but then once that policy is in place, it empowers local people to change big things. In any case, local people can solve a lot of problems can be solved locally. But at least in the U.S., I think people, there are a lot of people, very conservative people, give money to charity, and they go give time. They help out at a food pantry, or they tutor kids. These are decent people. And they feel like, I can see that what I'm doing makes a difference. But in fact, you can't make real progress against poverty anywhere without a political framework that makes it possible then for charities and businesses and poor people themselves to get ahead. We've all got to do it together. But you need that policy framework, and to get that, you need to you need to win elections, and legislative advocacy and all, and demonstrations help too.
David, I think, and you also describe very well in the book, because some of the listeners might ask themselves the question, okay, I understand, you have difficulties in the US, it's affecting a lot of what is happening in the US, but how is that related to poverty globally? And you explain about, all the things that the US government indirectly has done as well. And, when foreign aid diminished or USAID is totally abolished, that had huge impact then on activities and
Also
situation.
trade policy.
Yeah.
Also trade policy. The Trump's all of his tariffs has really disrupted the international trade system. It wasn't perfect, but it was open trade, help millions of people get out of poverty. And the tariffs are the tariffs are slowing progress down. And then war. See, the U.S. spends more money on the military than I don't know, but it's way, way, way more than any other country. And so in that, how do you use that power? I think actually from the end of the Second World War until Trump, the U.S. At least tried to combine the power that it had with a vision of the world that would be better for everybody. That there could be prosperity for everybody, and that would be a more durable kind of world than just pushing people around. So in all those ways, U.S. government policy is especially important. Although, in policy in other countries, European countries, they've got power too. And so citizens in Germany or in the Netherlands, I love the Netherlands. They tend to they sit at the big table, and they usually say the right thing.
I think, I'm pretty critical of my own home country. So I think there's a lot has changed. I think we have, try to imitate some other countries.
So when you have your next guest, if your guest is from another country,
yeah,
I'd really be interested to hear, I don't know how you could raise the same issues with them. Is what's happening in the U.S., is that comparable to what's happening in the Netherlands or Germany? And in what way is that comparable? And in what way are citizens of that country pushing back and helping to move the world in a better direction?
Okay. If the next guest is from another country, that's what we will ask. I know that this month there will be a person from another country, so I can also connect you then. I do something with the connection, so that's
Yeah,
good.
I'd really like to know what they'd say.
Yeah. Okay. Nevertheless, I think, with everything that's going on, I think after reading the book, I felt still hopeful. Okay.
Oh, very much.
But where does your hope come from? Is hope something you feel or something you practice?
Well, I'm deeply connected to the God of the Bible, and the God of the Exodus from slavery in Egypt. The resurrection of Jesus wasn't only kind of, the resurrection of one man. It was what happened to his disciples. They went out into the whole world, and they said that God is a God of forgiving love. And here are the things. Then, if God gives us a chance to, always gives another chance to repent, and then these are the things that you should do. And that energy within Christianity and through its influence on other cultural things has had a big impact on the world. So, and I'm very much part of that. You know, I believe, I say the Nicene Creed, and I go to church every Sunday. I go to communion. So that's a sense of connection to God. That gives me a lot of hope. And then the other thing that kind of bolsters my hope is that you and I have lived through the period of the most dramatic progress against poverty in the world. So we know that this is a fixable problem. And if we can convince other people to do that, you know, poverty may be an issue that can bring conservative and liberal people together. Well, you know, people, as it did on the issue of foreign aid or the issue of WIC, in the most partisan, most locked down situation, it was poverty that moved Republicans to break with Trump a bit. So those things give me hope. Also, the people, you know, the book describes people doing all kinds of things, you know, working on making social media more helpful, people trying to, in religious communities, trying to make their church a better church, more faithful, you know, people working on elections, legislative advocacy. So lots and lots of people and working in charity. You know, they're helping people in need. If they're tutoring a kid, that is really important. So all those people, I think seeing all those people and just realizing how many people in different ways are pushing, there is a poverty abolitionist movement. We don't need to create it. It's there. And what I hope is that my book helps people who feel that way, who are drawn that way, be more effective.
Um, if you look at poverty, right? That's the first sustainable development goal. Sustainable development goal number 1 of the 17 goals that we identified as a world to make this world more just and sustainable. And you know, obviously, we are far behind on reaching those 17 goals. And now this growing group of people have said, you know, one of the reasons that we are behind is that we are focusing on these systems and process changes that are necessary. But you can't do that without paying proper attention to the ability, skills, and knowledge that you need as an individual and as a community. And they come up with the inner development goals: being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. So maybe tailored to poverty and to our conversation today is, can poverty really be abolished without changing how we relate to one another? And if so, which qualities matter most? Empathy, courage, humility, collaboration, forgiveness, hope?
Yeah, that's really true. And I love the qualities that you rattled off. And it is true that the Sustainable Development Goals are pretty comprehensive, but they don't say anything about shalom. You know, they don't say anything about spirituality. You know, maybe that was just a bridge too far. You know, that they couldn't agree on that. But it is clear that what I would call spirituality, that, or how did you phrase, but moral character, and then the inner life that supports morality. That's absolutely crucial. And the last chapters in the book are about database changes in American religion and spirituality, data-informed changes in American religion and spirituality that would make us more progressive on poverty issues and on other issues as well. And they focus on. I do think that the most crucial thing is helping other people a priority. Do we make it a priority? But maybe I'm wrong on that. I like the way, it's also important that we treat everybody decently. How we engage with other people, how those things are also important. Just on the issue of, what people care about, what people are willing to work for and give money to. What the data, I spent a lot of time after I left Red learning about that, reading about sociological studies and about survey data. And I came up with 3 recommendations. One is participating in a religious community helps. There's lots of data. There's an abundance of data that show that being part of a religious community makes you happier in general, makes you more charitable, more civically engaged. But then not all spiritual communities are the same. And, in this country, some of them are very right wing. So you need to find a spiritual community that is loving, where you experience love, it's welcoming, and committed to social justice. And in that kind of spiritual community can really help us. Then I think that'll lead people to vote right, vote the right way, do the right kind of advocacy, live the right kind of life. Another one is educated faith. People who have education, who've had the benefit of education, and think critically about their own faith, they have more doubt. But they're also more progressive. They believe in social change. So educated faith, a thinking faith. The Bible, there's a passage in the Bible that you should love the Lord with your heart, soul, and mind. And so, we should use our brains to inform our faith. And then the third thing is, I love this, that in the United States, 90% of the people more or less believe in God. That includes agnostics. But agnostics have in mind a God that they're not sure exists. So it turns out that 50% of the people who more or less believe in God think God is more judgmental than forgiving. God is a stern father. And those folks tend to be critical of poor people. They're getting what they deserve. They got married too soon. They had babies too soon. They're lazy. And those of us who experience God as forgiving or perhaps permissive are much more inclined to support economic justice, including things like foreign aid and food stamps. So I think that's one framework for thinking about kind of the spiritual development goals. I think you're right that we're not going to get to the end of poverty unless, in this country, we need to make our nation and our government more generous. And that's a moral and spiritual issue as well as a political issue.
I really appreciate you explaining those 3 issues or 3 things. If if the inner development goals, folks would
Inner
listen.
development goals. You're right.
Yeah, if they would listen to you, they would say, "Hey, David is talking here about relating." So again, 5 goals, and relating is one goal. And under relating, they identified 5 skills, and one of them is connectedness, and another one is empathy and compassion, and then one is forgiveness. So it's kind of interesting. So, my reaction was when I looked at the inner development goals, and many faith people working for faith organizations are saying, oh, these inner development goals, that's what we do. And then I bounced that question back. Is that still really, are you really, carrying that with you? Are you taking every day your whole self to your work, or have our work become work? And maybe we need to continuously work on those skills. And I compare it with working out, right? The 6-pack. You might think you have a 6-pack, but if you never do your exercises or you work in the field, your 6-pack becomes this blubby, fatty 1-pack. So it's the same with what you talk about, right? In terms of connectedness, empathy. Those are skills that you need to continue to work on. So talk with your neighbors. Have conversations with them, despite the fact that maybe they have voted for another party. So build that connection and relationship. I would like to piggyback further on that, David, because you thank many people in your acknowledgement. And so what role have relationships, connections played in sustaining your work? And what keeps, movements alive?
Well, I acknowledge I acknowledge you as one of the people who's
Yeah.
had a big influence
I-
on this.
that- well,
Uh,
that's I told you, right? It's very humbling. I don't know if that's a right label.
it's right.
So
It's
yeah.
right. Um, that's a good point. We don't do this work as individuals. We're always part of a community. Actually, I'm not very good at remembering names. Fortunately, I'm married to a woman who remembers every name. She knows people. She knows their kids, their grandkids. So I can ask her, "Who's that from?" Or if we go, or if we're driving to somebody else's, to meet some people.
Yeah.
I gotta get a cheat sheet, and she can remind me who people are.
Yeah.
So I'm admitting to that's a serious weakness, but it is true that despite that, I'm connected to a lot of people, and the people who I remember most are people who are part of what I'm trying are part of the poverty abolitionist movement, because it's crucial to know those people, and um, it's a crucial part of it because we can't do this work alone. So being part of a movement of people means being connected to Maurice and Amelia and Jim, just a number of people that you can call on, and they share information or help you do what you're doing, or you can help them.
These conversations always go fast. I have, 1 or 2 quick questions for you, David. What would you to remember after reading the book?
Gives some thought to 1, 2, or 3 things that they can do differently, and remembers those things.
Okay.
If they think about themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and how can I have a bigger impact, and then resolve to do this, and maybe one thing that takes some time, and a couple other things that you can do without but that you actually make some I hope people will make some changes in their lives that will move us toward the world we want. So I'd like them to remember what they took out of it as they finished the book. I'd like them to write that down and do something differently.
In my regular episodes, I always have questions about music. You might remember that. I still want to ask you a kind of music related question. If I ask you to choose a song that best symbolizes or captures what your book is about, which song or piece of music would it be, and why?
Well, I knew that you'd be likely to ask me that question, so I gave it some thought. And actually, there's a hymn that I learned when I was in university. It's this hymn. The title is "God of Grace and God of Glory," and the hymn ends, "Grant us wisdom, grant us courage." Let me see. Right. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage for the facing of this hour. Isn't that great? Grant us wisdom and courage for the facing of this hour. So for this difficult time, we could use some wisdom and we can use some courage. I really do like that hymn. I learned it from a guy named William Sloane Coffin, who was a leader of the anti-Vietnam War movement. He was the chaplain at the university where I was studying. I was a conservative kid from Nebraska, but I wandered into that church, and he had a big influence on my life. And he later was the pastor of the church where the author of that hymn had served as pastor 50 years earlier. So I relate it with going to the chapel where he was preacher, and he was against the war. And then when Dr. Martin Luther King was shot, it kind of reminded him there's also a racial issue, and he got more involved in that again. He was a great, he's a personal inspiration, but he taught me that song.
Okay. No, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, David, before I thank you for today's conversation and for writing the book, any question that I did not ask you today that I should have asked you?
You were great. I think really good. I appreciate what you're doing now. How does this book relate to the work of the Joint Learning Initiative?
Oh, so for me, JLI is an organization that works on that nexus of faith and development, and so we are a community of academics, practitioners, and NGOs. Let's academics and practitioners. So, and our task is, I think, to help people to connect with each other, to ensure that we are strengthening, the work that is necessary to make this world more just and sustainable. And I would compare it with maybe what I always say is, convene, connect, catalyze, and help to translate or transform. So, and that could be by working closely with academics or working closely with NGOs in terms of, what works and what is the role of faith within this and how can it be strengthened. And there are, of course, there are reports that we have published over the years, and one is the State of the Evidence report that looked at issues of migration or climate, etc., and gender. And where has faith done well? Where was it not so great? And what has been the impact? And what we are looking forward to in the near future, and we're going to test that, is we developed a virtual learning ecosystem, online where people from all the world, from our community, can discuss with each other. So you don't only have reports that we have made, very important, but what do you do with that piece of information? And what does that mean within your particular context? And does it work in your context? Or do you have other terminology for things? I mean, that's very, that translation part where JLI can help is, I think the reason that there is so much polarization in the world is that we think we are talking about the same thing, but we are not. Or the other way around, right? We are talking about stuff, but actually in our context, it is labeled differently. So yeah, we are helping there to be the translator and that connector. And the most important thing is that I hope that the data that we produce or help to produce or are there to look at quality, et cetera, that it ultimately will lead to, as I said, more ensuring more impact in the interventions that need to happen to eliminate ultimately poverty, hunger, gender justice. So yeah, so that's what we try to do. It's amazing, David, because for some kind of strange reason, I got involved with this organization a couple of years ago, and for me, it's like so interesting to, as you know, I've worked for many years as more a, practitioner, although I started in academics, and now it comes kind of together. I
Right.
do have to say that, similar to inner development goals or a six pack, if you haven't practiced being a solid researcher, there are things that you need to work on again. So, but eh, I have, of course, experience in terms of I've seen many things around the world. So I've been blessed to have been in contact with people like you and yeah, learned a lot. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. Not easy in this world where there is little funding for working on sustainable development and you know policies or ensuring that indigenous population are more listened to and are part of the conversation. Those are not easy things still, unfortunately. So
So you walk, talk, and learn, and you're a poverty
I,
abolitionist. That's good.
those are your words. I'm trying to do my best. So
Okay.
yeah, thank you so much, David, and all the best. And really, the listeners should. How can they? Is it how can they buy the book? Or and will you
Well,
come
they
up
can go
with
to
a
any bookseller, to their local bookstore, or to Amazon or Barnes and Noble, or
outside of the US as well, or not yet?
that's a good question. Well, I think you can buy from Amazon anywhere, can't you? Must be. Can
Yeah,
you?
but maybe you could make an audio book that for sure
Well, they
people
can.
can
What
listen
they
to.
can do is go to Bloomsbury. So
Okay.
it's published by Bloomsbury. They're based in UK.
Okay.
So they could, if you're in Europe, you could, or probably in the Commonwealth. I don't know quite how far you'd, but you could go to Bloomsbury Publishing, and it's listed there.
Okay.
And
I will put it in the podcast
$3
notes.
cheaper than if you go to Amazon. So, so
Ah,
even if you're here, you might want to try Bloomsbury.
or be a friend of David, then you get it for free. So
That's right. That's right.
David, thank you so much and all the best.
This has just
Keep
been
on doing
great.
what you do.
And I appreciate the people who listen to us.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.